What is Brainspotting? Brainspotting is a trauma therapy that helps people process stress and trauma by using the positioning of your eye to help access parts of the brain and nervous system where those experiences are stored. Now, if that sentence sounds a little abstract, that's okay. Brainspotting is one of these trauma approaches that usually makes more sense once you understand where it came from and how it works. And that said, what questions do you have about brain spotting? Drop them in the comments and we'll answer them for you right alongside this video. And real quick, hi, I'm Dr. Jenny Hughes. I'm a trauma psychologist and the founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective, where I support trauma therapists as they do the work they love. Now, Brainspotting was developed by David Grand, who was originally trained as an EMDR clinician and trainer. And while practicing his modified form of EMDR, which he called natural flow EMDR, he started noticing something interesting. When he would do his slower bilateral stimulation, check out my video about EMDR if you don't know what that means. Clients' eyes started to land in specific positions, or there were subtle but consistent shifts and reflexes, emotional responses, physiological reactions would show up in these specific eye positions, even when the client wasn't actively talking about anything in particular. Or David noticed that he would be working on something that they had cleared with EMDR and going and staying at a particular eye position, the client would naturally just return back to something that maybe they hadn't even started with and go even deeper. And for David, instead of moving past these moments, he decided to pay attention to them and to experiment with what would happen if the eyes stayed in one place rather than moving back and forth. Like I said, over time, he noticed that holding the eyes in a specific position seemed to allow the brain and nervous system to process things in a deeper, perhaps even more organic way. We now know that through a lot of the imaging studies that what's happening is that brain spotting is allowing us access to the subcortical parts of our brain. That includes the limbic system, the amygdala, the brainstem, where our trauma is actually experienced, processed, and stored. And thank goodness for David's curiosity and his careful observation, because it eventually led to the development of brain spotting. And so while brain spotting does share lineage with EMDR, and that's very important, it became its own approach with its own pacing and structure and mechanism of change. And at its core, brain spotting uses that eye position as an access point to emotional and physical activation. But eye position isn't what's doing the healing on its own. What is really driving the work in brain spotting is that client and therapist connection, relationship, and a word that we use a lot, attunement. And I want to slow it down here for a moment, because attunement is maybe one of the most misunderstood aspects of this model, especially looking from the outside. Attunement means the therapist is deeply present with the client as the client is working on whatever they brought into session that day. The brain spotting therapist is tracking those subtle shifts in the nervous system, like changes in breath, muscle tension, facial expression, emotional tone, or even internal activation. The therapist isn't just watching. They are with the client in a very regulated and responsive way. And instead of directing the process or pushing things in any one direction, the therapist supports what the client's nervous system is already trying to do. Our brain and body know how to heal themselves. And when we give them the opportunity to do that, it can be so powerful. And so in brain spotting, the therapist follows the client's system rather than the therapist leading the system somewhere. And this is important because trauma doesn't resolve just because we understand it cognitively. Trauma resolves when the nervous system is also able to metabolize and release what's been held. And brain spotting creates really wonderful conditions for that to happen through attunement, pacing, and safety. And because of this, brain spotting sessions often look different from what people expect therapy to look like. We often use a pointer like this to help find the brain spot or that eye position I was talking about. And once we find the brain spot, there may be less talking than in more traditional forms of therapy. There might be really long pauses. And the primary goal is to support the client in simply noticing what's happening internally and to allow whatever is going to happen. This is an important similarity to EMDR, where we want clients to notice what comes up and to go with that as we use bilateral stimulation to help them process the trauma. In brain spotting, clients might be tracking physical sensations, emotions, images, memories, or subtle shifts in their body. Sometimes things move very quickly, right? That's super subcortical stuff. Other times it might feel like things are moving so slowly. And when we are thinking about that speed or even looking at things from an outside where we're not talking a whole lot, just because it doesn't look like a lot's happening or that there's not a lot talking going on doesn't mean that less therapy is happening. In fact, the therapist is often working very actively during these moments. They're monitoring regulation, watching for signs of overwhelm or shutdown, adjusting pacing, and staying deeply attuned to the client's experience. The work is happening at the level of the nervous system and therapeutic attunement, not just through words. For people who are used to therapy being very conversation or insight driven, this can be very unfamiliar at first. But for many clients, it's also the first time therapy feels like it's reaching a part of them that's been holding everything together for a long time. Which brings us to the question of, when is brain spotting the right fit for me, whether as a client or a therapist? Brain spotting can be really helpful for lots of presenting problems, lots of different kinds of people. And it can be especially helpful when trauma feels maybe more somatic or in our body than narrative and cognitive. So think about this. When someone understands what happened to them, and they understand why they react the way that they do, why they're so jumpy at loud noises, it's because they've probably made a lot of progress in therapy before, right? And a lot of folks who have made that level of progress still feel like something is unresolved. And so a lot of my clients will say to me, I get it. My head gets it, but my body doesn't. It's like my head and my heart are severed. So brain spotting can be a really powerful adjunct to traditional talk therapy and for especially these kinds of moments. And it's very frequently integrated alongside more structured or cognitive approaches to trauma work like cognitive processing therapy. And many clients find brain spotting after they've done tons of really wonderful and important work in therapies that are focusing on the meaning making, exposure, or some of those top down interventions. And clients notice that, yeah, that insight has helped, but the deeper change hasn't fully landed yet. Brain spotting gives the nervous system another way in. So, not instead of everything else. No, but right alongside it. From a therapist perspective, I'm a brain spotting therapist. Brain spotting often resonates with clinicians who really want to focus on the therapeutic presence, pacing, and nervous system safety. It also tends to attract therapists who are comfortable slowing things down, who trust the client's internal process, and who are willing to let go of the need to make something happen in a session. That said, that's not everyone who goes and gets trained in brain spotting, and it often converts people to be like that as well. It also requires a strong capacity for self regulation as a therapist because attunement is not passive. The therapist's nervous system matters so much in this work. And for many trauma therapists, brain spotting feels really aligned with how they already understand trauma, embodiment, and healing, even if it looks different from how they were originally trained. That was my experience for sure. And zooming out for a moment, brain spotting is one trauma treatment option among many. It's not necessarily better than other approaches or worse, and it's not going to be a fit for everyone. Okay. Some clients and some therapists want more structure. Some want more cognitive frameworks. Some benefit from exposure based work. Others need slower, more internally guided approaches. Training decisions and treatment choices depend on the therapist, the client, the setting, and the level of support and consultation that are available. This is one of the reasons I'm doing this whole series on all these different kinds of trauma therapies, because trauma therapists are often asked to make big training decisions without a lot of clear, grounded information. And those decisions cost time, money, and energy. And my goal here is to help you understand the landscape, not tell you what you should choose. And for all the clients who are watching, I also hope that this gives you some insight into what each of these different trauma treatments are like. So, as we close, remember that trauma doesn't only live in our thoughts or memories, it lives in the nervous system. And Brainspotting offers a way to access and support that level of processing through attunement, connection, and pacing, rather than focusing or maybe even forcing insight or resolution. So, if you're exploring different trauma treatment options as a therapist or a client, know that this video is part of a larger series where I walk through approaches like EMDR, cognitive processing therapy, brain spotting, and a lot of other ones so that you can make informed, grounded decisions without getting swept up in certainty or training hype. And I'll say it again before we wrap up. What questions do you have about brain spotting? Put them in the comments so that we can answer them for you right alongside this video.